Hello everyone. Welcome to this special interview with another member of the International Advisory Board of the Georgetown Institute of Open and Advanced Studies at Wawasan Open University. It's my great honor and pleasure to invite Dr. Stephen Oppenheimer, who is Research Fellow Associate with the School of Anthropology, Institute of Social and Cultural Anthropology at the University of Oxford. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you.
Let me quickly introduce Stephen, because he is world-renowned author of this book, which truly is amazing. It's called East of Eden. Now, Stephen was educated in medicine, but very quickly came out east, worked in Malaysia, worked in Hong Kong, and then did research all around Southeast Asia, out of which this book came. And he worked on genetic studies. He's worked very closely also with his wife, Dr. Frida Yang Oppenheimer, who is actually from Penang. And that's why we're very happy that Stephen has kindly consented to help the Georgetown Institute of Open and Advanced Studies to advise us and the students and the staff how to think about the role of the university in this digital age. So, Stephen, if you could explain to us what you're now working on, your latest book, and how you think education should go forward.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that kind introduction, Andrew. And also, I should mention that there were two other books after Eden in the East, Out of Africa, or Out of Eden, Beginning of the World, and The Origins of the British, both of which are in the same line of using multidisciplinary approaches to tracing prehistoric migrations. I'm a doctor by training, a medical doctor and a paediatrician by specialty, and as you kindly pointed out, I was interested in working overseas, particularly in the tropics, from a very early stage, going out to Hong Kong and Southeast Asia after my house jobs at the London Hospital. And I continued to work overseas 17 years out of the 26 years that I was doing medicine before I moved into the genetic migration field. I've always wanted to do tropical medicine and to work in the tropics, and I've worked in Hong Kong, Thailand, Borneo, Papua New Guinea, Africa, Nepal, and a number of other different places. And as a clinician, and later on I have chair of paediatrics in Hong Kong, in Chinese University of Hong Kong. My research career, which continued with my clinical career, really started at the end of the 70s, and I had just spent 2 years working in New Guinea as a paediatrician, provincial paediatrician, and I'd noticed that a lot of children admitted to hospital with anemia had infections, or children admitted with infections also had anemia. And it seemed that it was important to look at this association. And there was a literature on this at the time, and the suggestion was that iron deficiency, if it was corrected, would improve response to infection. And so I decided to set up a study back in New Guinea with full permissions from the Papua New Guinea Institute of Medical Research, and supported very well by the Wellcome Trust, and did the field work and did the analysis for this, and this was following a cohort of 500 children, and we couldn't break the code until the end of the study, And to my surprise and shock really, it turned out children who had received the iron supplement were more likely to be admitted to hospital. And they were more likely to have malaria, whether they were in hospital or in the field visits that we, and this is a very clear result. And what's more, the children who had lower hemoglobin at birth were even more likely to be admitted with malaria. And so that this evidence was contrary to the accepted view at the time, and for a long time after. It was difficult to persuade WHO, UNICEF, USAID that randomly giving iron supplements to infants in the tropical regions was not safe. But finally in 2006 we succeeded in a very large meeting in France with WHO, UNICEF and USAID to have a moratorium on that practice, and that is held. And so it wasn't my purpose to try and disprove a policy, but it was my purpose to look for the evidence that might support that policy. What I found was the opposite. Now, the reason for repeating that point is that I think that evidence is absolutely crucial. The unbiased assessment of evidence in any field, whether it's medicine, economics, actually looking at evidence and testing hypotheses rather than following on with what everyone else is the accepted view. And I think that aspect is something which should be useful in our discussions concerning Mother Son Open University, because many universities traditionally have told students what they need to learn. And one of the things which is less obvious in university courses, whether they're open universities or traditional universities, is this view that facts which are presented, positions which are presented, need to be examined and, if necessary, tested. Otherwise, one is just repeating the same mistakes. So, to go back to my career, after I'd done this work in New Guinea and published my results, I worked in other places, including Hong Kong, where it's paediatrics, and other parts of Southeast Asia. The outcome, serendipitous outcome of my study in New Guinea was that there were also genetic protections amongst the children I was doing the study with that protected against malaria. And these were found in the malarious areas along the coast, not in the highlands where there's no malaria. And what's more, these mutations which protected against malaria and mutations in the red blood cells were different in different language groups and in different groups. And I looked at these at different regions of the Pacific, Oceania, and these mutations were a record of migration. They correlated with language, and the difference between the two groups that I was surveying on the north coast of New Guinea were two different language groups, one which had come out of Asia and one which was indigenous to New Guinea, and the mutations they had were different. And that started me on a whole new career, as you mentioned earlier. That new career was looking at the genetic ancestry and migrations of people outside Africa. And that started off with the book that you've just shown, but also led on to my second book, which was looking on a rather grander scale on the Out of Africa movement into Eurasia. And a key finding in that was there was only one successful exit of modern humans from Africa to the rest of the world. Now, the implications of that, and this is again looking at the evidence, is that every person in outside Africa are related to a single exit. So you and I go back 70,000 years in our...
Even though we look very different.
So that you could actually use the particular part of the genome, and in my book I use the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA, so one from our father and one from our mother. And these were useful because they don't get shuffled at each generation, and they both have the same story. And that view was challenged, obviously, should be challenged, and has been tested again and again, and has turned out to be correct. So I think evidence base is very important, and it's an important skill to teach students, that it's not just a matter of learning, because some students are better at learning than others, but then other students are better at thinking constructively and creatively, and looking at evidence in a way which isn't just learning.
Yes, you've reiterated a very simple truth, and that is science is evidence-based.
Yeah.
One can make any statement, but if it doesn't comply with the evidence or facts, then that's not science. It's a very, very simple issue. But what you really reminded us is that actually it's not just important to teach or provide in education what one needs for what used to be thought a career for life, but also to now prepare them for many different careers.
Yeah.
So helping students think creatively, making sure that they question, that they don't accept what somebody tells them, be it a teacher, a parent, or just reading something in the newspapers, but just to question and say, look, do I agree with this? Now, how would you think the university now, in this very difficult age, when everything is changing at the same time, respond to the role of education?
Well, I think recognizing the critical approach to evidence and evidence-based decisions, which affect a whole range of things, as I said, including economics as well as scientific findings, is something which can be inculcated into the various modes of instruction. Now, in an open university, you may have MOOCs, online teaching, and the construction of that teaching should, I think, include this sense of humility that ultimately the arbiter is the evidence rather than the opinion, and so that whatever mode of instruction, I think that this respect for evidence and for evidence testing should be there, and that's obviously I can't insist on that, but I think it is very important, and there are cultural problems here because I think both in the East and the West there is a respect for authority, and authority are people who learnt their knowledge earlier, and of course knowledge is a constant state of renewal and change, and so everyone's knowledge will eventually become out of date, and so there has to be some recognition that when students ask questions about certain topics, it's worth thinking hard at the answers that we give, because it is evidence-based that is going to bring things forward. I can't, obviously I can't comment on economics, but there are several economic theories, but the economics is something which has some unexpected surprises, and trying to explain those on the basis of available evidence would maybe be useful in the same way as it is in academia. I don't know what your views.
Well, we can go on, whole day on this subject. Excuse me. The issue really is this: in science, you can check the facts, but in social science, a lot of these are conjectures. And by the time you get the facts out, things change again, right? The very fact that you tell your audience, everyone believes that what the old professor 30 years ago told you was true, changes the theory. And it's that reiterative factor which I think economists have real problem.
Mm-hmm.
That they don't know how to deal with, what they consider as theory, as self-evident truths, have changed because they actually brought it out itself. So you're really into a very much more complex game in which we now recognize that we're in an age when technology changes human behavior and human behavior changes technology, because technology is a response to changes in human behavior. Which is why I think the whole purpose of bringing someone from yourself from a very different experience. The International Advisory Board could have been was all economists, and what we will all do then is just repeat or debate over disproved theories. Whereas if you bring different people from different perspectives, then we arrive at an aha moment, that something in what you've looked at actually has huge implications in economics, or in politics, or in culture, or in education, and vice versa. And that's where the issues really develop. So what is your next phase of research?
Well, I'm involved in looking again at Southeast Asia and the Pacific, in particular with colleagues in Stanford, in Oxford, in Huddersfield, and in Mexico, in fact, looking at the whole of Oceania and the population prehistory of that. That's one of the projects that we're involved in now. We're also looking at another group, because I have several collaborative groups, looking at the date of colonization of Australia and New Guinea, which currently we think is probably about 65,000 years ago, but looking at this in a multidisciplinary way with archaeology, oceanography, and of course genetics. Those are several, but there are actually other projects that we're involved in. So I'm involved in a number of publications right at the moment. So I'm keeping myself busy.
How wonderful! But the experience that you've brought today is that you can start in the specialist area, move on to open to a new field, and then even that suddenly you say, well, if you bring in oceanography, and genetics, and anthropology, all these together, and history, and culture, right? Multidisciplinary, yeah. Which means that we can't think just deeply. We need to think very broadly,
yeah.
And we need to have a complete open mind. And even though we may have an idea that this must be right, and if the evidence says no, sorry, the evidence is the other way, I think we should go with the evidence. Well, Stephen, thank you very much. It's so wonderful to have you join the board, and we look forward to many years of close collaboration. Thank you, Steve.
It's an honour being invited, and thank you very much indeed, Andrew.
Thank you very much.